Hello there. Good to see you again. Uh, you made it to Wednesday, and certainly Tuesday was an absolute stunner between Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon. We've got a lot on our plate, and I recognised above all else that it just felt as if things are not the same as they were 6 months ago. It just kind of feels like the deaths are going up, the cases of coronavirus being, positive tests are going up. It kind of feels like folks are just not knowing when it's ever going to end. And that's just looking back over the last 6 months. And now Boris Johnson's told us that we're going to be like this for another 6 months. Um, Over the time, there have been occasions when I've quoted authors at length and tried to take the benefit of some people who have engaged with, tough stuff, and tried to kind of preach on it. And this is somebody, given the frequency with which people, well, his book sales are prodigious. I saw this online, and I share it because I think it might be something, especially on a Wednesday after the Tuesday we've just had. Um, there's an author called Max Lucado. Um, he is quite American, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad person. It probably means, in this case, that he's somebody you might need to think about. Max Lucado sold more than 100 million books in 54 languages. Christianity Today called him America's pastor, and the Reader's Digest, if that's a big deal for you, called him the best preacher in America. And what's interesting is this particular interview was happening with somebody who was obviously a fan. And just listen to what she says. With Max Lucado's books being everywhere, his audience was huge. I was quite nervous when I sat down to talk to Max Lucado about his journey of faith. I expected to feel incredibly inferior next to him, but I was wrong. The author is a humble and kind individual, and as we chatted with cups of tea in hand, he began to open up about the difficulties of life in lockdown. Lucado admitted that he found life very surreal and somewhat stressful, particularly at the start of the pandemic. So for the first weeks or so, he was unable to sleep or relax. Deciding to practice what he consistently preaches, he realized he needed to trust and believe that we serve a good God who sits on the throne, the only throne in the universe. And he's speaking about the fact that when there are situations where you just don't have any evidence that we have a loving God, how do you keep on going? And what he makes reference to is his latest book. And I realize that's one of those, I just happen to have a book that I've released. The point is, Max Lucado produces books the way most people produce carbon dioxide. I mean, he publishes all the time. And so this book is called You Are Never Alone, and it basically follows the life of Joseph. And this book was planned, he's very clear, the book was planned long before the pandemic hit. But it does kind of feel as if it was, God's timing, because one of the things that it deals with is the fact that Joseph illustrates how we're supposed to behave in times that are tough and challenging and stressful. And it was one of the articles, not about Max Lucado, but it was in one of the websites where it was saying that the lockdown has had a particularly bad effect on women, and the thing that they're most kind of complaining about is the number of women who are suffering from anxiety, not always necessarily knowing a specific issue. I mean, there's lots of things to be anxious about, but what they were saying was that women seem to be more prone to just anxiety, and especially younger women. Um, and he specifically addressed, Max Lucado specifically addresses that. He says more and more people are battling anxiety than ever before. He says, yes, it's especially true of the lives of young people. Millennials find anxiety and loneliness to be the two most severe challenges in their life. How unfortunate that the very season of life in which they should be adventurous, enjoying community, is for many people a time of fear and isolation. I believe this anxiety comes from three sources, and I did think this was worth quoting. We're exposed more and more to more news than at any other time, and so we're consistently bombarded with all kinds of other people's interpretations of current news. Bad news sells, and so we have lots of bad news being distributed throughout the world. The world is changing so fast we cannot keep up, and now with the pandemic, things seem to be the things we're facing we have never faced before, certainly not in our lifetime. And then there is just a sense of secularism, to believe there is no God, and at the same time we live in a fast changing world that's facing a pandemic, is a recipe that leads, quite understandably, to anxiety. I believe the story of Joseph is really apt as a consequence. We'll be battling anxiety forever, and Joseph models how to believe that God is not only in control, but is actually basically on our side and a good guy. We have many ways that we manage anxiety, and many of them are healthy, but nothing takes the place of a deep-rooted belief in the goodness and sovereignty of God. One last question. As you look forward to a time when lockdown around the world is over, can you see a different future for the church? We're seeing an openness to the gospel that's very, very encouraging. Revival is a sovereign work of God, and only He can orchestrate it. But we've been promised that Jesus would bring days of refreshing. If anybody is thirsty, let him come to me and drink, and out of that person's heart shall flow rivers of living water. That's a message about the Holy Spirit. When we come to Christ and drink, the holy water, the Holy Spirit flows out of us, and we're going to see the work of the Holy Spirit flow out of the church. I don't know what your reaction is to Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson yesterday. I know a lot of people are just kind of, oh man, another 6 months of this, come on. The difficulty is, you may be the very individual who has within them a reason for hope that other people don't have. And you have to recognize that that reality is something that you can share, not just as some kind of come along to church and it'll help the coffers and will, raise some more money. I mean, from the point of view of we live in a world where anxiety and stress is endemic, let alone COVID-19 being pandemic. Everybody seems to have this level of anxiety and stress. Christ is the answer. And as we get more news where people can be having their head in their hands and say, not again, we need to stay focused and stay on track and run for the finish line. Because the reality is, what Max Lucado has said is correct. Christ is the one who can make sense of the challenges, and Christ is the one who can work through us to change this world. I don't think the world will go back to quite the same way it was before, but the churches that will prevail are the ones that actually recognize the pandemic has given us opportunities as well as challenges. We, all of us, need to be ready to recognize we have to play our part in that. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. And most importantly, go with God, because I know He goes with you. Bye.